Councilman Borton's going to the dogs, I see.
Coops had to get on the record. Hi, Coops.
That dog.
Hey, Coops.
Anybody have any food?
Goopy.
He's going to be 15 this year. Isn't that crazy?
I read an article today about a town in Texas that elected a goat as mayor, in part because it had a bad drinking habit.
Hey, we have a goat too as our mayor. Greatest of all time.
Aw.
Look at this guy, smooth.
Well played.
With that,
Very good.
start of this meeting, let's go ahead and get this going. So council will call this meeting to order. For the record, it is February 2nd, 2021 at 4:31 p.m. We'll begin this afternoon's work session with roll call attendance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilman Borton,
Here.
Councilman Cavanagh,
Here.
Councilwoman Perot,
Here.
Councilwoman Strader,
Here.
Councilman Hoagland,
Hi.
Councilman Burnt,
Here.
Mayor Simison.
Here. Next up is the adoption of the agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Burnt.
as far as the agenda is concerned this evening, item number 4 on consent. Oh, wait a minute. Yes, needs to be removed. Is also the, we need to add an executive session item 1574-2061A to the executive session. With that said, I move that we adopt the agenda as amended.
Mr. Mayor, I second the motion to adopt the agenda as amended.
I have a motion and a second to adopt the agenda as amended. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. This appears to be out of order because there were no items moved from the consent agenda. We haven't done the consent agenda yet.
We did notice that earlier, Mr. Mayor, and we've corrected that on future agendas.
Okay, so next up is a consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Burnt.
I move that we approve the consent agenda for the mayor to sign and for the clerk to attest.
Mr. Mayor, I second the motion.
I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as it was amended. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Mr. Mayor, my apologies. Did we remove item 4 from,
Yes,
was that in the previous motion? My apologies. I went over.
I was confused on where you wanted me to do that because you put it under the adoption of the agenda, but it's actually consent. So I just.
Right, it could be either. So if you've already, Mr. Neri, if that's already struck, then
We
that's fine.
amended it.
Perfect.
We did, yes. Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the consent agenda as amended was adopted. Next up is the Department Commission report. So item 12, we'll turn this over to our Historic Preservation Commission regarding the history of Meridian Speedway presentation. I'm going to recognize Blaine Johnson at this point in time and let him introduce his team as he sees fit.
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, I'm Blaine Johnston, President of Historic Preservation Commission, and with me is Josh Everts, who is our commission storyteller. With that, our commission works to preserve the character, fabric, and historically significant areas and structures within the city of Meridian to honor and preserve its rich heritage and future generations. So we're waiting for a monitor to show up.
Mayor, City Council members, thank you so much for having us here tonight. This is something that we actually haven't done as a commission while Blaine and I have been in our leadership roles. So it's pretty exciting to bring a project where we're making a submission to the National Historic Registry of a primary location here in Meridian. So this will, as it's been a new project for us, it's also going to be kind of new for you. So we wanted to walk you through this sort of research project and what this looks like. So the first thing is when we find these sites that we want to submit to the National Registry, we actually engage with a third party that does what's referred to as our survey of that site. There's very, very specific criteria that have to be met for these properties to be listed on the National Registry. So we pay to have this work done. This actually took, when did we start this? I want to say summertime.
It was summer of last year.
Yeah, that they began this. They have been briefing us along the way. We're not showing you the whole report. That's too much. So we're just hitting a couple highlights here. But the site is the Meridian Speedway. We just felt that this had been such a primary central thing. We actually didn't realize how important it was until we actually got this survey done. I think all of us as commissioners were pretty excited to see some of the details, but we're definitely going to touch on those. So these are just some photographs that are taken in October to begin with. But what we want to cover is this speedway, while it was installed in 1951, so on the far left of what you're looking at, you're seeing the far out aerial view. And then if you look at the box insert, that's literally in 1951 what the speedway looked like. And then you can see the Meridian Speedway today. So what we have here is we have something that for 70 years has maintained, even though the size of the oval track was not quite as big as it is today because it had to conform to different standards. I forget what year that was, but for all intents and purposes, that speedway has been its same configuration for that amount of time. The sources for this entire survey. So we had the Meridian Dairy and Stock Shows. Hans spoke to us from there. Adam Nielsen from the Meridian Speedway, Lila, obviously, Stan Fuller is the Idaho Racing Museum, Idaho Statesman, and Meridian Times. So they review all these things and they're looking for articles, they're looking for stories, they're looking for photographs. So some of the work products that we get out of that, or some of the details we get out of that, is that the Meridian was the dairy center of the state. That was kind of the first narrative that came out of this. Kind of began with the Consolidated Creamery being built in 1897. And then in 1929, we have the Dairy Days being established as a showcase for livestock and dairy products when the creamery was built. So this was something that was recognized in newspapers that we were being recognized as sort of this dairy center. Flash forward, we get the Meridian Dairy and Stock Show Incorporation that was incorporated April 12, 1948. This was done with the Idaho Secretary of State. And again, this is the formal entity that would begin the Dairy Days and for the dairymen to be able to start doing different kinds of shows, stock shows, and being able to showcase here in Meridian what was happening in the dairy industry. What we see in 1949 is that this W.L. Hendricks, which was the president of the Idaho State Dairymen's Association, as well as the secretary of the American Dairy Association, said that the association of these grounds, so specifically talking about the grounds that the racetrack and the speedway would end up on, are entitled to support all you farmers and Meridian townspeople. This is the first tree to be planted. They planted a tree at that point as a symbol of what we can build for the future and the boys and girls of Boise Valley in America. So in 1949, this aerial view that we found showcases what that first kind of dairy show looked like. You have all the canvas covered livestock sheds that are on the right-hand side. And these grounds were dedicated in 1949 following the Dairy Day Parade. So this is 1949. 1951, oh, this is kind of an interesting picture. So this is actually the cattle exhibit building. So on the left-hand side here, we see a photo, which the earliest dated one we could find, which was May 1958 during construction. And you can see this cattle exhibit building in 2020. We still have artifacts, even though we had a fire that destroyed this. We still have artifacts of that roof line and what was originally there. So in 1950, we have the Meridian Athletic Association that gets organized. 1951, a dirt track is built. So that's that first image that we saw in the slide deck at the Dairy Show grounds. 1951, we purchased the lights from the Boise Junior College to light the tracks, races, softball, baseball games, things that we were doing on this infield. And in 1953, the Meridian Racing Association was organized as an affiliate of the Meridian Athletic Association. So we're starting to see these photographs show up. Not only are we seeing these old photographs, but we're starting to find advertisements that are in the local papers. So these are for some midget races in 1951, things that were showing up. And notice in the bottom of that left-hand one, all proceeds used for improving the speedway and recreation facilities for the benefit of the entire Boise Valley, sponsored by the Meridian Athletic Association, sanctioned by the Idaho State. So we're collecting money. But what we found, what was very, very interesting is if we go to our next slide, receipts from the Speedway were divided between that Meridian Athletic Association and the Racing Association. The MMA used its share to upkeep the site, but they also did things that benefited the community. So some examples of that is Little Leaguers only paid for their mouthpieces during this period of time, and uniforms were furnished as well as transportation of weekly games that were held in Boise. We have local tennis players that went to a national championship meet at no personal expense that was paid for by that association. And then summer recreation programs were provided to local youth. So this wasn't just the dairymen, doing things that were enriching, and telling the story of dairy. They were doing things that were enriching a community and using the Speedway to make that happen. So it has been the center of the community really since 1949. So this is where we kick off our Meridian Dairy Days. And certainly if you are a resident of downtown Meridian, you're seeing the life that happens at that speedway on a regular basis during the season. Statement of significance. I only included this because this is the kind of deep work that has to go in by our surveyors as well as the commission. But a statement of significance is kind of the guidelines and the overarching construct for how you get something submitted on the National Registry of Historic Places. So what we are communicating to our state office to begin with, that will end up being sent to the national office, is that the Meridian Speedway is significant at the local level under what's called Criterion A, agriculture, for its association with the agricultural history of Meridian and Ada County, the creamery, and other dairy related businesses that followed, establishing Meridian as a dairy center for the state. 1929, we get the Dairy Days established as a showcase for livestock and dairy products. In 1948, the Meridian Dairy and Stock Show was incorporated to support the annual event. 1949, the corporation procured land for the permanent site, and the Dairy Days is held annually for 2 days in June. So this is one section. We have multiple sections where we have to sort of make the case, and it's quite burdensome. So that's why we have to do these kind of deep surveys and get this information. So submission criteria: the Meridian Speedway retains the integrity of location, meaning it's been at the same spot, feeling and association, and as such retains a sufficient overall integrity to convey its significance under this criterion A as recommended eligible for the National Registry of Historic Places. So our independent third party that did this survey, they felt that it absolutely met all those guidelines, and we're excited to kind of advance that effort. So our next step is we will be submitting this to SHPO, which is the State Historic Preservation Office, for review. If they concur with our findings, then we've already talked to the dairymen. They're in full support of this. They really do appreciate the initiative that we've taken to recognize this, and they're on board. And then we would be drafting that nomination for our national registry. So with that, we're kind of open for questions or comments.
Thank you. Council, any questions?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Hoagland.
Mr. Mayor and Josh and Blaine, thanks for the presentation. Good information. Having spent time there listening to inspirational halftime talks when we played our football games at the Speedway, there in the dairy barn, sitting on the stall, was a great motivator to get back out on the field. So, but my question is related to that north side.
Yeah.
And, it is still the wooden structure and whatnot. Is placing this in the National Registry, I know there are restrictions for homes and different things when you go to modify, restore, or anything like that. Would that apply in this situation?
As far as national is concerned, once it's listed, the owners can do anything they want to do. It may, if they tear something down, it may cause it to be delisted because of that, if they do a significant destruction of such structures. But again, just because it's listed, the owners can do anything they want. If the Dairy Association wants to, in the future, move it, that's their business, and we have nothing. We're just trying to say that right now, at this point in time, it's important for the city of Meridian, the valley, and the state to have this property listed as a national historic property.
and it is the speedway. So even though that north structure, you know, that went through a fire and has been modified clearly, and typically that'll exclude you if you've had significant modifications, but this is really for the speedway where we've got that thing that was created in 1951 and we have the whole narrative, and then we have something that has effectively maintained
Mhm.
its role in the community for that amount of time.
Mr. Mayor, just to follow up on that.
Councilman Holman.
Yeah, I was just curious because if they ever did want to, you know, redo the stands and because they did that to the west side, it used to be all wood and
Pave the gravel area.
the gravel area, yes, and some other things. So I was just kind of curious if they want to make some modifications, that it doesn't restrict them from improving the property.
I don't believe it will. And I probably have to go back to Firebird Ridgeway. It was listed a year ago on the national list of historic places. And I know it's gone through significant changes in its lifespan so far. So I think if they want to change bleachers or something like, it's not going to affect the listing.
Thank you, gentlemen. Mr. Mayor, thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Burnt.
Thanks, guys, for your presentation. Mr. Edwards, Mr. Johnson, appreciate it. The question that I had, I think you somewhat answered, and that is, in the future, if the owners of the Speedway want to move, that they're able to do. I know that, and that's confirmed, that's a fact.
Mhm.
There's,
Yeah,
that's,
as somebody who owns historic buildings, yeah, you can be delisted, you know, if you make some change that's material to its function form that takes it out of the registry. But you have autonomy to do the things that you want to do to your property.
The other thing that it does for the Speedway and the city is that if any federal money is used to, let's say, widen Main Street out, so it would impact the stands, they would have to reimburse the dairy board for that work done because federal money is involved with taking it down. So it does protect the Dairy Association, the Speedway that way also.
There are very, very few, I forget the number that they told us, but when they did their national survey of how many like quarter-mile tracks in cities are actually listed on the historic registry,
There's less than 10.
yeah, there's less than 10. Like, so this is a really significant submission just in terms of it's become a very rare thing. And being able to protect that, you know, is important to us. Or get it acknowledged, I should say.
Mr. Mayor, just follow up.
Councilman Burnt.
I'm in favor of this. If there's one thing that that is Meridian, one of the staples of our city for sure is the Speedway. It's sort of funny when at my house in the middle of summertime, I live somewhat close to the freeway, and people ask me in the past, does it bug you to live so close to the freeway? And I'm like, I really can't hear the freeway, but I can certainly hear the Speedway. And for me, that is what Meridian is. It's never bugged me once. It just reminds me of who we are and what we represent. And so it's an honor to be able to support this for you guys.
Thank you.
One other comment that I'd like to make is our intent, and hasn't been possible with COVID, but we really would like to, if this is something that actually makes it to the National Registry, we really would like to do something to honor the dairymen, because they're really the ones that are responsible for creating this asset and being a part of this narrative. And you know, I know that we do lots of things to acknowledge them, but I just think this has been a really big effort and something that they could have very well said no, and they've been very, very supportive, and love the fact that they're getting acknowledged for this kind of historic thing that they've done here in the city.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Schrader.
thanks, gentlemen, for presenting, and this seems like really important work. Sure all of council appreciates it. When I think of, Meridian, there are some symbols of Meridian that I think are really important to protect, to sort of tell our story. I think this is one of them. The water tower too. There are some things like that that really kind of keep our history alive and tell our story. So I appreciate you guys doing this. Thanks.
Thank you.
And if I could just say, in my, one of the few things I've taken on as mayor, as you know, is my role on the advisory council on historic preservation. Honestly, I think it's really cool that the city's undertaking this and potentially can have this put on while I'm in that role, even though I didn't initiate it. You guys have done all the work, but be my honor to help make sure that I can do what I can to help make that occur. So appreciate all the work that you've done.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Kavanagh.
first, gentlemen, it's great to see both of you, more ways than one. Appreciate the presentation. What are some of these next steps, and at what level does the Speedway want to kind of demonstrate and communicate this out to the public? I appreciate that you've engaged them and the dairymen. What's their approach? I mean, I doubt this is a let's present to council and move on. What are some of the next steps?
Yeah, so specifically, we will submit this to SHPO because they have to get behind this before we can submit it to the National Registry. The State Historic Preservation Office has to be in agreement. There's not a role really for the dairymen to play until the
Okay.
state says, yes, we think you've met the criterion A to have that submitted to the National Registry. Once the state has given that blessing to that and is willing to submit that, the dairymen have to agree to that. And we've already briefed them and they've said that that's something that they're in support of. So any work on the dairymen, there's not anything for them to do. Anything that we could do as a city, I think would come after we would get acknowledged. And I don't know what the time frame is for the National Registry, but at whatever point, if they made the determination that they did include the Speedway on the National Registry, there's nothing really for city council to approve at that point. We're doing our work as a commission. I do think that it'd be nice to do some kind of public acknowledgement, press release on behalf of the city, again, kind of recognizing the dairymen in this effort.
Yeah, as a commission, if it is approved, probably we would like to get a plaque to put up somewhere on the Speedway at an entrance so people can see it as they walk in. So that would be the last step we would do if it's approved.
With a party.
And maybe a race like the end of Talladega Nights might be in order.
It should be Blaine and I in a foot race around the track.
Love it.
Walking.
Walking, yes, of course.
Council, any further questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you.
Appreciate it very much. Council, next item is item 13 from our Community Development Department regarding the ACHD 5-year work plan project requests and prioritization. I don't see Mr. Hood here or online. Let's see, he's hiding under a different name. Mr. Clerk, have you seen?
Ms. Carson's here now, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Miranda, we'll turn this over to you.
Hello. Mr. Mayor, council persons, I was asked to present the integrated 5-year work plan that we submit to ACHD. This is something that we as a city submit every year, and it's a list of projects that we would request ACHD take on to make improvements to roads and intersections, and then also community programs, such as filling sidewalk gaps, occasionally pathways if they're in the right of way. So the packet should have the list that was recommended by Transportation Commission. So this list went through a thorough check by the Transportation Commission over 2 separate meetings, and they recommended the list as it's written here for council. Your role would be, and I apologize if you already know your role, but council role would be to review the list, make any changes to the prioritization, and then we would send it to ACHD as our official request from the city. There is one project that has been brought up in communications with staff that was not on the list. It was not originally presented to the Transportation Commission. It is the Lake Hazel Eagle to Locust Grove improvement in the master street map that's planned for 5 lanes. It is on the list in the community program section to have pedestrian improvements, but it is not on the list for roadways and intersections to have any kind of roadway improvements. So I just ask council to consider if that's something you would like added to the list of requests.
Thank you.
And I have maps and I have the list and I am ready for any questions council may have of me.
Thank you, Miranda. And council, if I could just follow up on what Miranda was just speaking about regarding that segment. You know, as we look at the continued development in the south related to Discovery Park, you know, I've often talked about the need to get people safely to that facility. And to me, that includes vehicles, not just pedestrians. And while we're getting close with pedestrians, especially as we look at making that, quite frankly, a nighttime regional softball complex through additional phases, having, you know, good, safe streets for the cars to drive in that area. And with the improvements that are already being planned along that stretch, ACHE is planning on doing the intersection of Eagle and Amity, which will complete about 1/8 of a mile of that road. And then with Brighton's project at Locust Grove and Amity, they will be doing 1/4 mile that direction. And when we do the next phase of the park, we're going to be required to do about 1/4 mile. So that really leaves about 3/8 of a mile, maybe more on in some sections that would need to be completed to complete that fully in some fashion, even if it was 3 lanes with curb, gutter, sidewalk. And there's even projects out there which are having sidewalk installed at this point in time on part of it. So that's really why this was it's not on a list, but I think it's worth consideration of trying to make a complete road connection to our regional park. You know, from a personal standpoint, I feel like Locust Grove would be the better connection. But from a practical standpoint, when all the investments being made on Eagle Road, that makes it a much quicker. And if it's a regional facility, people will probably get off of Eagle and take that route down there for when they participate and do things. So that's part of the reason why that one, it's not on the list. It's not a huge priority, but I think it's important to talk about making those connections in the future. So with that, be happy to take any questions, comments, discussion at this point in time.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Hoagland.
Mr. Mayor, just wanted to find out, you know, we have the new Owyhee High School opening up here in the near future, and there's going to be traffic on McMillan and Ustick heading to that high school. And a lot of some of the things out there farther to the west on Ustick are not programmed. And I know there's going to be some development and growth coming into that area, which will help fund some of that. But I'm just wondering what discussions took place regarding the opening of that high school and the impacts, which will seem to be more immediate than long-term.
Miranda, I have my own viewpoints, which I'm going to bypass those for now and see if there's any discussions at the Transportation Commission level regarding those projects. Miranda?
So I will say that, Mr. Mayor, councilpersons, the Transportation Commission did ask me to reach out to both parks and the schools in reviewing the list to see what input they had. So there was input taken from the school district on projects that would rank higher for their priorities, as well as our Parks Department on projects that would rank higher. So Owyhee High School was one of the projects that was considered, was one of the developments that was considered when they created the list. There were a lot of things that were considered. And in looking at the list, if you look at the 2020 ranking versus the 2021 ranking, you can see where they made a decision to move things up or down based on different criteria, like the school.
Brenda, thank you, and Mr. Mayor, just a quick comment on the two sections I happen to be looking at was they moved them from 19 to 24 and from 45 to 47. So that was just kind of scratching my head on that one. It's just like I said, we're just going to see significant growth out there, and of course, there's so many competing priorities, and we know transportation is a major priority and one of the concerns of our citizens. So just a matter of figuring out which pieces of the puzzle to put in place first and what order they go in. But it's one of those things we may see after this fall that some things may move around for next year.
Councilman Hogan, I think you might be looking at that backwards. They moved up the 2021 versus the 2020. I know typically I would have read it the same way. So they have been moved up slightly.
Mayor, you're right. I was reading it left to right, not right to left. So slightly is correct.
Councilman Perot?
Thank you. Just a question going back to the Lake Hazel conversation we just had. Can you share some, Mr. Mayor, can you share some idea of timeline with Discovery Park, when the anticipation would be that the city would be obligated to commit their portion of that stretch if it were to be completed all the way through? Are we looking at 5 years from now, 3 years from now?
Yeah, I think the question would be is at what point in time does the city believe that Discovery Park needs or would warrant those connections? I would argue immediately or
Okay.
now, but you will see your Parks Commission come forward with in FY22 for the next phase. I don't recall when phase 3, which is when I think the softball fields are at least currently contemplated, which to me is one of the bigger, more car-driven, a lot of traffic moving in and out for continuous play. But I see we have Director Sidaway, so I'll turn this over to him.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. So we are prepared to come to the city council and make a more robust presentation on Discovery Park, its amenities, its timing. But I would just say that from our perspective, our ideal scenario would be to move forward with design, which is already funded this year, with the idea that we might bid next winter. And then construction takes about 2 years or year and a half. So that would be 22 and possible opening fall of 23. But we would need to make some of those decisions early now in order to meet that kind of a time frame. So that would be our ideal, but there's a lot also that depends on the road improvements and things like that to come along with it. But that would be the fastest that it could happen.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilwoman Schrader.
I guess maybe just for discussion, one thing I have been thinking about is our number 1 and number 2 requests and what kind of signal it sort of sends if our Linder Road overpass is not a number 1 on that list. Seems like we're pushing really hard for that, and that feels like it should be listed as number 1 would be my feedback. And then I know some people had reached out, and it's more an ITD issue, I think, than ACHD, but we have, I think you guys are aware, received a lot of feedback about the expansion of Chinden and not having a right turn lane at one area heading onto Black Cat, and that is a pretty significant safety issue. Not sure where the oversight was on that project and what exactly happened, but that might be something that we should discuss. And then finally, I do agree with Councilman Hoagland in the sense that I understand what the Transportation Commission is really trying to do is to improve whole corridors at once. I think that makes sense. But I think in a year or two, we need to make a big push in that northwest area of Meridian, especially around Owyhee High School. And I know there are structural reasons. McMillan is a challenge, but a lot of these roads in this area are already like this area is already heavily populated as opposed to some areas in South Meridian. And I think around the high school, I think we really need to take a look at that.
And I think from a council conversation perspective, I think it's really which road. You know, I think from a practical standpoint, USTIC is the road
USTIC.
that people are looking at right now with how the projects are prioritized, is the road to Owyhee. And it's probably just from, quite frankly, cost feasibility to do that one compared to McMillan. But if
Mr. Mayor.
council has a different viewpoint, we should make that known. Yes, Councilman Schrader.
No, I think that's fine. I don't disagree. If we choose to focus on USTIC and that's the route, then we can do that. But I guess to Councilman Hoagland's point, I'd like us to look around Owyhee High School and make sure that we're reflecting the right prioritization. I think if it's number 40, that feels pretty far down the list.
And Mr. Mayor, I just have
Councilman Hoagland.
a question related to, we have, if you look at number 7 on the priority ranking, Ustick Road, 10 mile to Linder Road, it's to widen 5 lanes with curb, gutter, sidewalk, and bike lanes in accordance with the 2016 CIP. And that's all good and well. However, for the eastern half from Linder heading west towards 10 mile is 5 Mile Creek, right up against it. So widening that's going to be problematic, but it can be done. I don't know if they're going to cover it. I don't know what the deal is, but just on the north side of the creek is our pathway system. And I'm just wondering the expense of widening that and having the creek there, needing that extra right of way when there's houses on the south side, the creek on the north side. Is ACHD open to things like having the bike path follow our pathway system as opposed to creating separate bike lanes in the roadway system? I probably know the answer to it, but I'm raising that question.
I can only speak for one commissioner. I think one commissioner very much does not feel that we would need to add a bike lane in that specific location because there is a detached regional pathway adjacent.
Mhm.
But that's also working with ACHD and their policies and whatnot. But I encourage you to speak to your local ACHD newly elected commissioner from your area.
Mr. Mayor, that's a good suggestion. Thank you.
And Mr. Mayor, sorry to interject. This is Christy Inselman with the Ada County Highway District. I just wanted to let you guys know that I'm also on the call. If you have any questions for ACHD, I can address the question by the council member on that particular project.
If you'd like to, go ahead, Christy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So that particular stretch, it's the USTIC 10 mile to Linder, correct?
Mayor Christie, yes, that's correct.
Okay, so yes, that one is going into design next year. There has been a bit of a shift in focus at ACHD where it comes to bike lanes on the roadway. With regards to, we're moving away from doing bike lanes on the arterial network and doing some other type of facility, whether it be a multi-use pathway or raised bike lanes or something to that effect. So that is the direction that ACHD is going, and the commission has asked us to go on those projects. So when we get into design next year, we will definitely reach out to the city staff for their input on that one as well.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Hoagland.
Mr. Mayor Christie, that's great to hear. We certainly would want to communicate on that because for at least a half mile of that segment where it's right, the creek is right next to the road, and then we have the pathway, regional pathway, that'd be a great place to do that. And then when it jogs away from the road, maybe bike lanes are needed, but it would save on cost for the taxpayer on that. So something we should take a look at. So thank you.
Absolutely.
So council, I don't know if you would just like to review this over the next week and provide any direct changes directly to Miranda for consideration, and she could accumulate those and come back next week with what she hears from council at that point in time for further conversation, or we're happy to continue the conversation on individual projects if you would like.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
the question about Lake Hazel is interesting. I'm just curious if you have a suggested priority ranking that you wanted that moved to or placed at. Help me understand kind of where you're thinking on that.
Councilman Cavanagh, I don't have a specific place in mind at this point in time, and since it was so low on the list. I think it would really be if council is in agreement that we should be looking at that, then maybe finding the appropriate place to consider that type of a project or not. You know, if this list is not reflective of my priorities from a practical standpoint, it is the commission's priorities and it's based upon council's actions last year. So I didn't want to superimpose my viewpoints on any specific element at this point in time, but rather just raise it for discussion and consideration.
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Yes, Councilman Cavanagh.
I appreciate those comments, and I think that's the piece, at least, that I'm struggling to wrap my head around, is that this is not an individual council member's priority list or the mayor's priority list. This comes from our Transportation Commission, which I recall at least discussed some of that, maybe not to the same level that we have tonight. So I am hesitant after the fact to make broad changes and movement. I'm certainly open to the conversation. I think Councilmember Strader hit an important piece about the Linda Road. That's something that we continue to speak, and should we make it number one? If I recall, I think the reason why the Transportation Commission didn't at least list it as number one was because of all the many agencies' involvement that are going to be required to make that happen. And they wanted to make, I think, a more feasible project, at least number one, recognizing that in such, when that's completed, at least the Linda Road project would move up to number one. So just I think some background for council. I'm open to continue the conversation next week, but I'm not quite sure that I'm, at least for this year, supportive of making any broad changes.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Miranda. Oh, wait, Councilman Pro.
thank you. I haven't had a chance to digest this list in the detail to which I would like to do, so I would appreciate that extra time, and we'll communicate with Miranda any questions or concerns that I have over the next week. I'm hoping that Miranda and our ACHD representative here on the call can give us some more information about what is going to happen with priority number 3. So this stretch has long been a concern of mine, and last year we had the same the same information that it's not been programmed. I know there are a lot of challenges with getting right of way along that stretch. So if they could provide any updates that they might have on how that's coming along, and will we see this priority actually come to fruition anytime in the next few years?
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, Councilwoman, is it Peralt? Sorry. I don't want to butcher your name.
It's Perot, actually.
Perot, okay. Mine gets butchered all the time, so I try not to butcher anybody's name. Perot. Apologies. So yes, that I don't know yet, because we're still in the beginning phases of this update, whether this one will come into the new plan for the 22-26. With the 2020 CIP update that was just done this last year, that one is forecasted need between 2026 and 2030. So I do anticipate that project coming in the next upcoming years. I just don't know at this particular stage if it's something that will make it into the next plan, but it is certainly part of that discussion.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Pro.
Thank you very much. Can you shed some light on what's causing the delay? Is it right of way like I believe we've discussed in the past, or is there something else that's going on that's creating a challenge for ACHD?
Madam Mayor, Commissioner Perot, It's always a multitude of factors, right? It's what's the needs for the entire county. Are there areas that are showing a greater need? Like the Eustic segment, that is one that is likely to come into the plan, the Black Cat to 10 Mile, because that is showing a greater need at this time. Funding always is an issue. We wish we could do every road that we need to, but we evaluate every single year. And is there an area that is elevated that wasn't there last year? And that's something we do over the next upcoming months. We reevaluate all of those roadways. What are the level of service looking at? What type of development has come in that's going to spur the need for that to be accelerated into the program? So that's where we stand. I apologize, I don't have a more definitive answer for you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Miranda.
I also wanted to note that the Transportation Commission last night voted to create a prioritization subcommittee that would spend the year looking at this list, so that because we are moving so quick as a city and changing so quickly, to have more time during the year to look over the list rather than taking the 2 to 3 months that they usually take when the list is sent to us. So they'll be looking at it continually of the next year for when we bring this back next year.
Thank you. And I do know, Councilman Schrader, just from a historical perspective, typically when things are programmed and in the top list, there generally has not been a desire to move things up or around. I know at least from the staff perspective, because they feel like that they've got the attention, they're being planned, they're being funded. And I'm not gonna say 1 through 10 doesn't matter, but in many cases, it's they understand the importance from ACHD from where we prioritize, whether it's 1, 2, or 3. But our 2 and 3 in this case are definitely large, expensive asks and requests.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Schrader.
thanks for that background. Yeah, I my intention wasn't to meddle too much with the list. There's clearly has been a lot of thought put into it. The one thing I think we should consider would be flipping that Linda Road overpass to number 1 would be my suggestion. But ultimately, I think the mayor's office would need to be strongly supportive of that. But I just think from a messaging perspective about the urgency of that priority and how important it is to us, we have a higher likelihood of it happening if we're messaging consistently that it is our number 1 priority, if that is the case. So that's it.
Thank you. Council, any further discussion at this time? Okay, we will have this back next week for final comments. So thank you, Miranda.
Thank you.
With that, council, we are on to item number 14. Councilman Burnt.
Sorry, Dean. Appreciate you, buddy. You're the man. I move that we go into executive session, Pareto Code 74-206A1A and 74-2061A.
Mr. Mayor, I second the motion.
I have a motion, a second, to go into executive session. Is there any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Borton?
Aye.
Cavanagh?
Aye.
Rowe?
Aye.
Strader?
Aye.
Hoagland?
Aye.
Burnt?
All ayes, and we adjourned into executive session. Or recessed or moved. Councilman Burnt.
I move that we come out of executive session.
Mr. Mayor, second the motion.
I have motion and second to come out of executive session. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay.
Mr. Mayor,
The ayes have it. Councilman Burnt.
I move that we adjourn the meeting.
Mr. Mayor, second the motion.
I have a motion and second to adjourn the meeting. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We are adjourned. Mr. Clerk, are we ready to go? Okay. Council, I will call this meeting to order. For the record, it is February 2nd, 2021 at 6 p.m. We will begin tonight's meeting with roll call attendance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilman Borton,
Here.
Councilwoman Perot,
Here.
Councilwoman Strader,
Here.
Councilman Hoagland,
Here.
Councilman Burnt, Mayor Simison,
Here.
absence Councilman Cavanagh.
Next item is the Pledge of Allegiance. Y'all please rise and join us in the pledge. Next item is our community invocation, which this evening will be presented by Pastor Tim Cusey with Valley Shepherd Church of the Nazarene. If you would all please join us in the invocation or take this as a moment of silence and reflection. Mr. Pusey.
Thank you. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day, and we thank you for this wonderful community in which we have the privilege of living. We thank you, Lord, for our city council and for others who serve our community, some behind the scenes, some on the front lines. And I pray your blessing and your guidance for our city council tonight as they consider matters relating to the well-being of the people of our community. And Lord, may their decisions and choices reflect the well-being of all of our people. We thank you for them. We pray for wisdom and guidance for them. Lord, we do pray for the people of this community. While we recognize that in so many ways we're a prosperous community and there are many who are thriving, we also know that there are those who are struggling, particularly in a year like this past year has been. And Lord, we do join others in praying for healing of the COVID-19 virus here and around the globe. Father, teach us in all that we do to demonstrate the love of Jesus Christ in all of our responses to the needs of people around us. Thank you again for the privilege of calling upon you. We thank you for the assurance of your presence and the assurance that we can have that we need not walk through any of these challenges alone. In Christ's name we pray, amen.
Thank you. Council, next item is the adoption of the agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Burnt.
looking at the agenda, we don't need executive session after this meeting. So I move that we strike items 4 and 5 from the agenda. So we'll finish the evening off with public hearing, item number 3. With that, I move that we adopt the agenda as amended.
Mr. Mayor, I second the motion.
And just for clarity, there is currently only item 4 on the agenda at this point in time. So just removing item 4.
Item 5 would have been amended on if you needed to continue it from 4:30. So that's the note there.
You're making it too confusing for me.
Council, any discussion on the motion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed,
Aye.
nay. The ayes have it. Motion is agreed to, and the agenda is adopted. Mr. Clerk, do we have anyone sign up under the public forum?
Mr. Mayor, nobody signed up.
Okay, then we move on to action items. First item is going to open the first 2 items together, which are final plat modifications for Shelbourne East, number 3, MFP 2021-002, and final plat modification for Shelbourne South, number 1, MFP 2021-0001. We'll open this public hearing with staff comments.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. The next 2 applications are for final plat modifications. This property is located approximately a quarter-mile west of South Cloverdale Road, north of East Amity Road. The applicant requests a modification to the previously approved but not yet recorded final plats for Shelbourne East, number 3, and Shelbourne South, number 1. The modification proposes to expand the boundary of Shelburne East number 3 to include one additional common lot and reduce the boundary of Shelburne South 1 to exclude 2 common lots. The plat on your left there is Shelburne South number 1. The plat on the right is Shelburne East number 3. The Bureau of Reclamation owns the lot that contains the 10-mile feeder canal indicated there on the map in Shelburne South and does not wish for their property to be included in the subdivision. Without this lot, the lot on the other side of the canal is no longer contiguous to land in the subdivision and can't be included in Shelburne South number 1 subdivision. Because it's contiguous to Shelburne East number 3, the applicant is proposing to include the lot in that subdivision. So you can see here the map on the right is the area that's proposed to be included in Shelburne East. Written testimony has been received from Kent Brown, the applicant's representative, and he is in agreement with the staff report, and I believe is online if you have any questions. Staff is recommending approval with conditions in the report. Staff will stand for any questions.
Thank you, Sonia. And I wasn't correct. This is not a public hearing, so we did not have to open anything up. Council, do you have any questions for staff at this point in time, or do we need to hear from the applicant?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Perot.
Sonia, so the 10-mile feeder is going to stay with subdivision number 1?
Mr. Mayor, Councilwoman Perot, Councilman, no, 10-mile feeder is owned by the Bureau of Reclamation.
Okay.
They do not wish for their property to be included in the subdivision plat. So if you can see that area right here, it's that thin narrow strip. If that area is excluded from this plat, then that leaves the triangle piece right here, which is not contiguous to this plat. So therefore, the subdivision to the north up here is the Shelburne East number 3, and that's what's shown here on the right. So they're just including that lot up with that one.
Mr. Mayor, a follow-up.
Councilman Perot.
Thank you, Sonia. As I was reading through this, I was trying to, the way the maps were in the file, it was a little bit confusing. So this slide helps a lot. I was trying to figure out what was happening with that piece, and I knew they wanted to exclude it. So thank you, that this is much more clear than what was in the file we reviewed.
You're welcome.
Council, any additional questions? Or do I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Hoagland.
I will take them in the order of their how they are listed for final plat modification. I move approval of MFP 2021-001 final plat modification for Shelburne South number 1.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Burt.
I second that motion.
I have a motion and a second to approve item 2, final plat modification for Shelburne South number 1. Is there any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Borton,
Aye.
Perot,
Aye.
Strader,
Aye.
Hoagland,
Aye.
Burnt.
Aye.
All ayes. Motion carries and is approved.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Hoagland.
I move approval of MFP 2021-0002 final plat modification for Shelburne East number 3.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Burt.
I second that motion.
I have a motion and a second for final item number 1, final plat modification for Shelburne East number 3, which is MFP 2021-002. Is there any discussion? If not, clerk call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Borton,
Aye.
Perot,
Aye.
Strader,
Aye.
Hoagland,
Aye.
Burnt.
All ayes, motion carries, and the item is agreed to. Thank you very much. Item 3 is a public hearing for KB Fabrication and Welding, H 2020-0121. We will open this public hearing with staff comments and turn this over to Alan. Alan, you're muted. There you go.
Yep, sorry. I was trying to share my screen there. Did that come up?
Yes, it did.
Great. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. This is a proposal for a vacation of a landscape easement. Here is a map of the property, basically at the northwest quadrant of Eagle and Franklin. The property is about 2.5 acres of land. It's presently 2 lots. It's zoned IL in the northwest quadrant. So I said it's Eagle and Franklin. In September of 2020, a certificate of zoning compliance and design review was approved for a 2,500 square foot office building and a 9,000 square foot welding shop on 2 lots that are in different subdivisions. I've prepared this next exhibit here. Although a building can overlay an interior lot line if both lots are under the same ownership, it was discovered that a 20-foot landscape easement existed along the southern property line of the northern lot, and the shop building would be encroaching on this easement. So to illustrate, here is the Olson and Bush subdivision number 2. And what you see here in red, this is the first lot. There's a second lot down to the south here. And if you can see, there is a landscape easement here. On the right side of the screen is the entire development. So this would be the first lot in the Olson and Bush subdivision number 2. This is the second lot in the Olson and Bush subdivision number 3. And this here is that landscape easement that is being vacated. The purpose of this landscape easement was to ensure that subsequent development was respectful of residential development to the south, meaning the residences which are down here. Since the time of the final plat approval, though, the lot to the south was purchased by the applicant, and now, as I said, it's part of the same development. The improved CZC includes a 25-foot residential landscape buffer at the southern perimeter. That's what you can see down here. That was the intent, again, of the original landscape easement. So therefore, the landscape easement is no longer necessary. As part of the final approval of the CZC, the applicant's required to vacate the landscape easement by amending the plot and then merging both of these lots together. When this is completed, the applicant can apply for the building permit. With that, staff recommends approval of the vacation of the easement. If you have any questions or comments, council.
Thank you, Alan. Council, any questions for staff?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Pro.
Ellen, did you say that the southern lot is going to be added to this subdivision? Or, I mean, I don't know if I've ever run across 2 lots that have one use, but one is in a subdivision and one isn't. Does that create challenges in the future?
No, ma'am. It's the 2 lots are in different subdivisions, but they both have the same zoning. So lot one is in subdivision number 2. And the bottom lot is in subdivision number 3. But when they do the property boundary adjustment, they're technically creating a new subdivision of 1 lot, which is merging it together.
Thank you.
Council, any additional questions? Okay. With the applicant, like to be recognized for 10 minutes? Mr. Brown?
Thank you. I don't really have anything else to add. I just needed to make sure that this could be completed. We've already submitted a application to combine both properties as long as this was vacated. So that's all we need. Appreciate your help tonight.
Okay, thank you. Council, any questions for the applicant? This is a public hearing. We have nobody in the room. We do have someone from ACHD on the line. I don't know if ACHD has any desire to provide testimony without asking questions. So if you do, please use the raise your hand feature. But otherwise, I think we can take a motion from council at this point in time, unless the applicant would like to make any additional final comments. Seeing no desires. Council, do I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Hoagland.
I move that we close the public hearing on H 2020-0121.
I have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Hoagland.
after Hearing from staff and applicant, I move that we approve file number H 2020-0121 as presented in the staff report for the hearing date of February 2nd, 2021, as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Thank you, Ms. Mayor. Borton,
Aye.
Burrow,
Aye.
Strader,
Aye.
Hoagland,
Aye.
Burnt.
All ayes, motion carries, and the item is agreed to. Thank you very much, staff and applicant, and a quick meeting tonight. Council, anything under future meeting topics? Or if not, do I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Burnt.
I move that we adjourn the meeting.
Mayor, second the motion.
I have a motion and a second to adjourn the meeting. Any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We are adjourned.
Is 16 minutes like a record, you guys? Yeah? Did we just set a record?